The New York City Commission on Human Rights does not provide legal advice. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals and do not necessarily reflect the views or position of the Commission. Enjoy the show.
Hello, New York. Welcome to another episode of Rights Here, Right Now, from the New York City Commission on Human Rights. I'm your host, Jose Rios Lua, he, him, Chief of Staff at the Commission. Rights Here, Rights Now airs at the last Monday of every month on WHCR 90.3 FM. Each episode will give listeners the info they'll need to live, work, and thrive, free from discrimination in our city. As always, before diving into our show's topics, here's a little background information on our agency. The New York City Commission on Human Rights is the city's agency that protects New Yorkers from discrimination in employment, housing, and public spaces. The Commission is charged with enforcing the city's human rights law, one of the broadest civil rights laws in the nation. The law prohibits discrimination against over 25 protected categories such as race, age, gender identity, and sexuality. New Yorkers can report discrimination to the Commission by calling 212-416-0197 or visiting our website, nyc.gov/humanrights. Again, that's 212-416-0197 or by visiting our website, nyc.gov/humanrights. The Commission also seeks to prevent discrimination by conducting outreach to educate New Yorkers on their rights and responsibilities under the law. The Commission provides trainings and workshops that detail the protections enshrined in the law. Our trainings are grounded in the idea that our rights are interconnected and that we all have a role to play to advance equity in New York City. You can request a training on our website. Again, that's nyc.gov/humanrights. As always, I'm joined today by the Commission's Deputy Commissioner of Policy and External Affairs, Joann Kamuf-Ward. Joann, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jose. Good to see you.
Joann, we don't have any guests with us today to ask what their favorite thing to do in New York is, so I think we'll just ask each other what our favorite summer thing to do in New York. So what is your favorite summer thing to do in New York?
Okay, on the way here, I was just talking about this. It is taking the ferry from Manhattan to Brooklyn. So I did that twice this weekend. I love the ferry.
In my early years of living in New York, I would sometimes just take the Staten Island ferry round trip just to see the Statue of Liberty. But I think I love our beaches as well. We have really good beaches. So, going down to the Rockaways, going to Jacob Riis Beach and enjoying a nice day of sunshine and reading a book by the ocean is, I think, my favorite summer thing to do in the city. And also there's a lot of rooftops around the city to have some fun while the days are long.
And maybe next time we can talk about summer reading lists. What are some good New York City books?
I think that's a great idea. So we were not able to have an episode of Rights Here, Rights Now in May. So we thought we'd start off today's episode by recapping some of the ways the Commission celebrated AAPI Heritage Month. And one of the ways we did that is through a civil rights walking tour organized by the Commission in solidarity of the AAPI community. Joann, can you tell us a little bit about that walking tour?
We'll talk a little bit about Chinatown history, and there's so much intersection, I think, between many of the communities that we work with and the history of New York City. But the tour itself was really to talk about the organizing and community solidarity that have been central to the Brooklyn Chinatown neighborhood. Manhattan Chinatown. What I was going to say was that Brooklyn Chinatown is actually the largest Chinatown in New York City, but people, I think, when you say Chinatown in New York, often think of downtown Manhattan. So in conjunction with one of our volunteer commissioners, Rocky Chin, who has a long history working on equality for Asian Americans, we organized this tour to highlight shared histories and efforts to combat social injustice in the face of adversity and to really reflect on the rich history of civil rights in New York City, something that will be a theme today and in our future episodes as well. There's so many rich historical sites in Manhattan's Chinatown. We wanted to just highlight highlight a few. It kind of builds on our themes of favorite places in New York City. And sometimes you can walk by buildings so many times and not know what the history was. So one of the places that I would highlight if you're walking around Chinatown is Chatham Square, and it's where many of the main arteries of Chinatown and Manhattan come together. It's named for the Earl of Chatham, who supported the American opposition to the Stamp Act, which was a tax on printed papers imposed on all American colonies by the British in 1765. And in the 1800s, it was a popular entertainment spot. So people would go to the square and listen to music. In the square, you'll also see another monument. It's an arch from the 1960s, which was named after Lieutenant Benjamin Kim Lau to honor his death while fighting for the United States and the memory of Chinese Americans who died in World War II. And it's actually a designated official landmark by the Landmark Preservation Commission. And two more things I'll note. One is on St. James Place in Chinatown. There's the oldest Jewish cemetery in Manhattan, and it was founded in 1683 by survivors of the Spanish Inquisition.
Oh, wow.
And the last one is the spookiest one. It's Doyers Street. It's really famous for having a 90-degree turn. It makes its way into lots of movies and B-roll on TV shows. It's named after a Dutch individual who owned a tavern on the block. But one legend is that the street was constructed with that angle so that ghosts could not travel down the street because they were good at going straight. And so if you build a 90-degree angle, you will foil all the ghosts. Is that true?
I think we should find out in October.
Yes, and listeners weigh in.
There's so much rich history in the city. I think it's one of those things that, like, no matter how long you live here, there's always something new to discover. And so thanks for sharing some of those places. I think we don't get out to Chinatown as much as we want to, even though our offices are located very convenient to Chinatown. If you ever need to visit the Commission on Human Rights, we're located at 22 Reed Street in Tribeca.
And we sit on a site of historical significance as well. We are co-located with the African Burial Ground, which is also a national park, and there's tours all the time and some really fantastic artwork and memorialization. So come visit us, also visit the African Burial Ground.
You and I are extremely lucky to have great views of the burial ground from our offices, and so the monument is beautiful. Another event that the Commission hosted to celebrate AAPI Month is our art pop-up event. And so to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, we hosted an art event with our community partners, the Chinese American Planning Council, commonly known as CPC. And we hosted it at their headquarters. The event showcased AAPI experiences in America and featured artwork from local artists and organizations, including the Korean American Family Services Center, Youth Community Project Team, Ramon Chen Wu, and former artist in residence Amanda Fing Podembake, who actually was an artist in residence at the Commission. And I know we talk about our campaigns every episode. I know we do.
It's okay. We're going to talk about one later, so that was both foreshadowing and a pre-apology.
But it's hard to mention Amanda's name without mentioning her amazing work with our campaign, I Still Believe in Our City. And so it was really, I think for our team, really important to make sure that she was included in an art pop-up event honoring AAPI Month because of the important aspect of her artwork playing in our agency to combat anti-Asian hate in our city. And so maybe we should start off talking a little bit about that work. Then we'll talk a little bit about the event itself. I Still Believe in Our City was a citywide campaign that included murals, artwork, tote bags, which are very famous. We're very, very sought out for our tote bags, which we'll talk about a little later as well.
It was also there was a takeover of Barclays Center, so you might have seen the artwork and not known it was CCHR, the I Still Believe in Our City campaign, and you can still download the posters on our website. But yeah, I think it was during the time period of COVID when there was a real spike in anti-Asian bias and hate crimes, and we are a law enforcement agency, but we recognize that the law is only one pathway to addressing discrimination, and there are many, many tools to bring people together, and art is one of those really important tools. And so we were extremely lucky to have a practitioner artist in residence join us, and she worked with us for a year to talk about the protections in our law what we were seeing in the city and how could we bring awareness, but also a sense of togetherness to New Yorkers, some who knew our agency already and some who were feeling really, I think, divided and isolated.
Yeah, and so I think, how can you host an art pop-up event without including the iconic artwork of this artist? Our agency put out a call to artists. We had some responses from some amazing student artists, and we're able to partner with CPC to host this kind of gallery type of event. And we made an intentional decision to combine it with the walking history tour. And so folks who were on the tour ended at this art pop-up event and were able to enjoy some amazing art and refreshments and really recognize the accomplishments and the cultures that are represented in the AAPI community. So just wanted to do a little bit of a recap of what we got up to in May. And we are talking about June now. June is Pride Month, and the Commission is no stranger to celebrating and standing in solidarity with the LGBTQIA+ communities. Under the New York City human rights law, it is illegal to discriminate against someone based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. Simply put, in New York City, you are free to be you. And as our ever-popular tote bags, see, I said they would come up again, as our tote bags say, live with pride, we've got your back. So we've been pretty busy during June, attending Pride events, doing trainings, getting ready for the big Pride March this Sunday. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about our law and what we do to protect LGBTQ plus New Yorkers in the city. As I just mentioned, it's illegal to discriminate against someone's sexual orientation or gender or even gender expression. And that protection is not just about actual sexual orientation or gender expression or gender identity. It's also perceived, and I think it's really significant for our law. Discrimination because of gender includes discrimination based on gender identity or expression or being intersex. These protections cover discrimination in many places, including at work, at school, in housing, and in public spaces such as restaurants, movie theaters, or parks. The law also protects New York City's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex communities against retaliation, discriminatory harassment, and bias-based profiling by law enforcement. So there's a lot to talk about in there, Joann.
It's also important to recognize that the law has been changed a number of times, reflecting a more expansive understanding of what gender means. So in 2002, the New York City Council passed a transgender rights bill, which really was meant to expand the scope of gender-based protections under the New York City human rights law. And it was for people whose gender and self-image did not fully accord with the legal sex assigned to them at birth. That was sort of one of the legal starting points, but as City Council became more aware of the types of discrimination that people were experiencing based on their gender and gender identity or perceived gender and gender identity, they continued to amend the law. So then later in 2018, the human rights law was actually amended to expand the definition of gender, really to be more inclusive. Part of recognizing gender identity is to allow individuals to use facilities that are consistent with their gender identity, and that's been something that's been in place for many decades and I think makes New York stand out as amongst other jurisdictions. I mean, I think we are all seeing and hearing about attacks on transgender communities and LGBTQIA persons and thinking about how privileged we are to live in a place where there's legal protections, even though we know the legal protections are one way to protect people. There's obviously cultural understanding that's needed, and that's one of the trainings that our agency does is to raise awareness among housing providers and employers and nonprofits, private companies about what it means to work in a culturally competent and sensitive way with people regardless of their gender identity or sexual orientation.
And so the Commission has taken some strategic actions throughout the years to help support LGBTQ plus New Yorkers, making sure that they're treated with dignity and respect and without threats to discrimination and harassment. And some of those actions include expanding its enforcement efforts to root out discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender, and gender expression through testing and other investigatory techniques. We also engage with faith leaders to develop a network of LGBTQI plus affirming faith communities, and also as part of the New York City Unity Project, a multi-agency effort to expand holistic services for LGBTQI plus youth. The commission helps facilitate supportive family conversations around sexuality, gender identity, and expressions, and the challenges LGBTQ plus youth face. So these are just some of the ways that the commission shows up for queer communities. Again, also on our website, nyc.gov/human rights. That's nyc.gov/human rights. We have a lot of materials around our protections based on sexuality, gender identity, gender expression. And some of those include scenarios to help you identify discrimination. For example, in housing, a landlord tells a tenant that his same-sex partner cannot be added to the lease, but allows other tenants' opposite-sex partners to be added to their lease. In employment, an example could be that an employer denies an employee parental leave when her same-sex partner gives birth to their child, but provides other employees parental leave when their opposite-sex partners give birth. There are many more examples, and we want to make sure that you understand that you don't have to be able to figure out whether you're being discriminated against or not. That's what we're here for. You can always give us a call at 212-416-0197 and talk to our info line folks who can help you figure out whether something is a violation of the human rights law. And if it is, we are happy to help. All of our services are free of charge. And if it's not something that we can help with directly, but another agency can, we're happy to refer you to those agencies. But we have some kind of what I will call LGBTQI plus celebrities in our agency. Some have officially called them power players. And so I wanted to spend some time to recognize that we've had 2 members of our staff recognized in this year's 2024 LGBTQ plus power players. The annual Politics NY, AM New York, Metro, and Gay City News LGBTQ plus power players list highlights many LGBTQ plus leaders driving positive change through New York and the nation. And the commission is proud and honored to share that our agency's LGBTQ plus communities lead advisor, Daryl Cochran, who is also the director of our Manhattan Community Service Center, and human rights specialist and transgender liaison, Tabitha Gonzalez, were both named as power players in their inspiring contributions as leaders and activists. And so CCHR is fighting for the rights of LGBTQI plus New Yorkers, and that's nothing new. It's something that we've been doing for a long time.
So we were going to talk a little bit about Stonewall and the importance of those moments in time in transgender activism. I also wanted to recognize, we just talked about some of our staff who are really moving the needle in conversations today and ensuring that protections in the New York City human rights law apply to everyone and are known to everyone, but they really stand on the shoulders of a huge array of New York City activists who have been involved in ensuring equality for all. So I thought I would name a few of those things, and then, Jose, if you want to talk, you can talk a little bit about Stonewall itself. So I think, a few people, some of whom are recognized explicitly in some of the work we do and have legal organizations named after them. So some of these names might be familiar to you, but first I'll start with Marsha Johnson, who is a trans woman of color who is born in New Jersey, but she moved to New York, so that's why we can talk about her, and is really considered one of the main figures behind the organizing for the Stonewall riots. After a history of being a prominent drag queen, she was represented by Andy Warhol, and then came out as transgender, which was not even a term that was really used at the time that Marsha Johnson was living, but she understood and saw some of the intersections that we're talking about today, and worked with youth through something called the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries Project, or STAR, to help support young trans women, drag queens, and kids who are living on the street, ostensibly because of their identities. She worked closely in this effort with Sylvia Rivera, who's well known as well, and played a role in the Stonewall riots. Rivera was a 17-year-old drag queen and part of the crowd outside of Stonewall. There's a little bit of controversy over whether Sylvia Rivera threw the first or second Molotov cocktail as part of the Stonewall riots, but either way, really legendary for standing up against injustice and inequality. And really, the Stonewall riots ignited activism that Sylvia went on to do in support of the Gay Activist Alliance and working for passage of a New York City gay rights bill. And, I mentioned in 2002, there was effort by city council. This is many decades later. So I think it's both a lesson in persistence, but also the rich history of New York City. And I think a less well-known, at least in my education, was an individual named Frank Kameny, who is an notable individual fighting for gay rights pre-Stonewall. He was born in 1925 and was an individual who really fought in a nonviolent way for rights strongly influenced by the civil rights movement. And in 1957, after serving in the Army, like so many people in that time period, he was fired from a U.S. Army map service because of his sexual orientation. He was a gay individual. He contested his firing in one of the first ever court petitions brought forward on the grounds of discrimination of sexual orientation. And this really was a genesis for fighting against discrimination by government actors for people based on their gender identity and sexual orientation. So in 1957, he was fired. He received an apology in 2009.
For some of you who may not be familiar, the Stonewall riots has also been called the Stonewall Uprising and the Stonewall Rebellion, or just simply Stonewall, were a series of spontaneous demonstrations against a police raid that took place in the early morning hours of June 28th in 1969 at the Stonewall Inn, a well-known Greenwich Village gay club. It is one of the iconic moments in the gay rights movement. Some say the beginning of the gay rights movement, and I think it's also just a staple to not just New York history, but queer history. Many people are very familiar to the name Marsha P. Johnson as being associated with the demonstrations, but also what some folks might not know is we actually have a conference room at our agency named after Sylvia Rivera. And they have been inspiration and really have fostered a legacy of advocacy in the queer community. We recently lost an advocate in the queer community, Cecilia Gentili, who had close ties to our agency in advocating for queer and transgender New Yorkers, and not just on a local level, but on a really national level, an international level. The work that has been inspired from Stonewall, while we're not done, has brought us this far. And I think while we should be thinking about this year-round, it's really difficult for us not to pause and recognize the suffering, the work, the labor that folks had to endure to get us to this point. I think I was talking to folks a little while ago at our annual LGBTQ Iftar event, which is an event that we partner with the City Center for LGBTQ communities. And it really is an opportunity for us to host a space that is at the intersection of sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and faith. And I think it's one of those places where that intersection is really difficult for a lot of people to express fully and authentically. And it's because of the work that has happened over the past 60 years that we're able to create those spaces and create opportunities for people in New York City to really authentically express themselves fully. Because I think one thing that happens for a lot of folks is that you're able to express yourself authentically in silos, right? And so, I can be myself fully around these people, and then around these people I have to hide this part of my identity, and around these people I have to hide this side of my identity for safety, for many, many reasons. And so it's really important for us to be able to create those opportunities as an agency to be able to uplift that authenticity so New Yorkers can feel their 100% full selves. Joann, you were about to jump in.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to pivot a little bit just to talk about the upcoming Pride Parade. If we could talk about if people are coming out, what they'll see, what is CCHR doing on June 30th as part of NYC Pride, so we can talk about how we're celebrating New York City.
I'm extremely excited because, as you know, Joann, the march has been really all I've been working on for the past couple of weeks. And so we're excited that we're going to be a part of the march again. We're going to have our own contingent, and we're going to be handing out again our very popular tote bags, which if I didn't mention it before, I'll mention it again. They say, live with pride. We've got your back. And that's really what the commission does, no matter what your sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. And I'll go beyond those protected categories and say, no matter your race, your religion, your nation of origin, what language you speak, in New York City, you have the right to live, work, and thrive free from discrimination. And we're here to support that right and to enforce it. So if you want to see us, I suggest you get on the parade route and be there around noon. We'll be stepping off, and we're going to be handing out some of our tote bags and some other goodies along the route. Commissioner Palma will be joining us. She's our agency's very own celebrity. The good thing is this year we've had a more coordinated effort than ever to make sure that we attend the prides at all the boroughs. For the first year ever, we've attended Staten Island Pride this year. And so our team has been really working to make sure that we are out and visible to as many communities as possible, because the more you know about us, the more likely you are to come to us when you need us. So having that information is super important. And one of the ways that the commission combats discrimination is through raising awareness through public education campaigns. And it seems like we're always talking about our campaigns on the show, like I said earlier, but I think we're particularly excited because we just launched our newest campaign, which is a campaign against bias and hate that we're calling #TogetherNYC. And we have a clip for you all to hear.
Hate and bias have no place in New York City. The Commission on Human Rights protects New Yorkers from discrimination in the workplace, housing, and public spaces based on race, religion, or other protected categories in the city's human rights law. An essential part of our work happens when individuals contact the Commission because they see or experience discrimination. To report discrimination, call 212-416-0197 or visit nyc.gov/human rights.
So that's Annabelle Palma. You will see her on Taxi TV, but this campaign will also be in bus shelters. It will be in link kiosks, and it will be on social media as well in many, many languages. And we're excited about this for a few different reasons. One is the moment that we are in as New Yorkers, but also nationally. And I'll give here a little plug to voting. But we have seen historically when there are divisive elections, and here we're talking about the presidential election that's coming up, there is a rise in xenophobia, there's a rise in bias acts, bias language, and expressions of hate. And so we're really excited to have a campaign that's really reminding all of us why New York is so special. Our diversity is our strength. Most of us do not descend from Lenape people, so we have all come from other places and live here together, sometimes in harmony, sometimes with a little bit of strife. But I think what always makes New York feel special is when people come together and support each other and recognize how that difference plays out. And that's, one of the roles, obviously, of our agency. Another reason that we're excited about the campaign is that it has some action items for New Yorkers to express this solidarity. I think people can feel like they're not sure what to do when they see times of division, and so we're putting some things out there to help you. One of the pieces of the campaign will be the ability to take a pledge, and if you take the pledge, you will receive a message from Annabelle Palma. But the pledge, and I'm going to just mention some of the action items of the pledge here, is a way to again, express solidarity. See how many people in New York City are going to come together with a positive message, celebrating difference and make everyone feel welcome and respected. That can be showing up at Pride. It can be showing up at another festival or unifying celebration, but it can also just be in your day-to-day interactions with people you see on the bus, on the subway, on your walk to work. Learning more about our bystander intervention training and, importantly, being an ally against bias and discrimination. If you see something, say something is a very prominent campaign, I think taking that to the person level, you often have the opportunity to be an ally. But of course, we want everyone's safety and comfort to be part of the equation. So in our bystander intervention training, CCHR staff really walk through different scenarios. It's very interactive, and it's about what to do in scenarios that strike you as being unjust and bias motivated. We also have lots of other workshops that Jose has mentioned today and in the past, and they're all listed on our website. So you can sign up and take a training, or have your employer or housing provider sign up if you think that would be beneficial. And then something else we're launching as part of this campaign will be a survey that really asks New Yorkers for their opinions and perceptions, either on discrimination they might have experienced or seen, and what kind of solutions you think will help move New York forward in a unified way and puts our best inclusive foot forward.
One of the biggest tenets of this particular campaign is it's lifting up that as New Yorkers, we all have a role to play in creating a city where everyone can live, work, and thrive together. We're really looking forward to having a campaign that's not just information, but it's interactive. And so for all of you to be involved. I wanted to add one more action item that people can do, and that's sign up for our newsletter. We have a monthly newsletter where we talk about upcoming events, where we're going to be. We highlight some work, and there is a message from our commissioner that highlights some of the work as well. And so it's an easy way to stay informed and to really learn more about the community. It's once a month, so we really don't spam your inbox. So if that is something that you are interested in, you can also sign up for our newsletter. There is a lot of work that's happening in this area around striving to be more anti-racist as a city. One of those things is that we are launching our anti-Black racism working group, and it's been almost 4 years since CCHR released the Black New Yorkers and Their Experiences with Anti-Black Racism report. And as part of the ongoing focus on visibility and engagement, we're building on past efforts to explicitly make a work stream that focuses on preventing and addressing anti-Black racism. I know Joann, as the senior leader who's kind of spearheading this work and leading it, it was really important for you to make sure that every aspect of our agency and every unit of our agency was represented in this workflow. And so I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about the working group and what we can look forward coming from them.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention this is really part of a citywide effort that comes from voters. I didn't mean to have a voting theme, but I have a voting theme today. You know, New Yorkers voted on the ballot in 2022 to create a racial justice commission and an office of racial justice. And so agencies across the city are looking inward and outward to think about setting goals and indicators for what anti-marginalization work looks like, what reparative work looks like, and how as a city we can be responsive to the needs of New Yorkers. But CCHR's efforts, which will feed into that, are also, as Jose mentioned, really about thinking about all the areas of work that we do and how are we ensuring that people know about the race and color protections in our law, that we're talking to people who maybe have either never interfaced with government, who have had negative experiences with government because of their identity, or as Jose said, their perceived identity. So we'll be looking at legislation and policy. We'll be looking at our communications efforts and our community outreach, and thinking about specific campaigns that speak to some of these areas of law. And we'll also have our admin services and operations folks, because it's really how do we best serve New Yorkers, and I credit the commissioner for really thinking intentionally about this and giving the agency space to have people from all different units come together and think about what we can do different and better.
I think it's one of those things that can be easily taken for granted, is that the importance of having people who have different experiences and from different walks of life. And so having people from different parts of the agency, like you mentioned, our administrative services folks and our operations folks, just because they're not part of the programmatic side of our agency doesn't mean that they don't have valuable contributions to add to this work. And I think it really does enrich our work to have voices who might think about things from a different perspective in that conversation. So
the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I think that's Martin Luther King and is really important to think about. There's been a lot of discussion about how activism is for change in law and change in policy. It's slow. Yeah. It can be disheartening, but I think it's a message of hope that drives us on our team to come to work every day and think about the long game, right? How can we affect change that is beyond us and our time at an agency and think about a better New York in the future. We are very informed by history, and sometimes it's difficult to identify what is the true history, but we just celebrated Juneteenth, which has, after a very long time, been recognized as a holiday for New York, but also federally. So, to celebrate and honor Juneteenth, CCHR participated in a whole number of events across the boroughs to ensure the message that the government of New York City stands against discrimination, and that includes discrimination based on race. So we were part of a Freedom Festival in Harlem, a Juneteenth Fatherhood Freedom Cookout in Brooklyn, a Juneteenth Freedom Parade and Festival on Staten Island, and several flag raisings, including Juneteenth flag raising in the Bronx. As we move forward, again, the survey is one tool that we are using to reach New Yorkers and to hear your perspectives on discrimination, but again, importantly, on solutions and what we can be doing better. But, we urge folks to reach out to us and have conversations.
When we are able to share more information about the survey and folks can reach out, if folks can take the survey, because I think one of the things that is underappreciated is that discrimination doesn't happen in a vacuum. It affects a person's life completely, and it intersects with many parts of their identity. And so something that you might think, oh, this is discrimination for just one particular protected category is actually informed by other things. So just keeping us on theme here of, someone might be experiencing discrimination based on their gender expression, but then that might also be augmented by that person's race. Something like ballroom culture is at an intersection of multiple identities. And so it's really important to us to hear from New Yorkers to understand the full spectrum of their identity and how they interact with discrimination as a whole authentic person.
And I think it also informs the trainings and outreach that we do. I mean, we spend a lot of time talking to folks who may have experienced discrimination about how to report that, but we also are very focused on the prevention aspect. So the folks in your life that have obligations to stop discrimination if it's occurring, and definitely to refrain from engaging discrimination, that's your landlord, that's your employer or supervisor, that's folks who own the businesses in your community. We want everyone to be part of the solution and to feel ownership of making this a city where everyone can thrive.
Joann, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And to listeners, you've been listening to Rights Here, Rights Now, a radio show by the New York City Commission on Human Rights on WHCR 90.3 FM. And if you believe that you've experienced or witnessed discrimination, we ask that you reach out to us by calling 212-416-0197 or by visiting our website, nyc.gov/human rights. July is Disability Pride Month, so we are excited to come back to you, share more information about our survey and campaign, and more information about how the Commission on Human Rights supports people with disability in New York City. Until next time, have a great day.